They disappeared for 1,500 years. Death came in 1 second, and their return was due to a surprising coincidence. A darkness that covered the sun caught them, a fear that corrupted their souls. I am coming to tell you much more than the ordinary tales of the volcanic destruction in Pompeii. If you want to listen to the real story of the people who turned into stone, a more brutal event than horror movies, lean back and get ready for this exciting 2,000-year journey. Look at this photo carefully. They are ordinary people who are called 13 fugitives and trying to escape from Pompeii. While they were trying to save their lives, the wind of 350 degrees centigrade destroyed them all in 1 second. Some were sleeping while others were hugging each other, praying to the gods, so they just stood there. How did they turn into stone, and what did they experience in the last 24 hours? Was this a punishment from God or an ordinary natural disaster? Pompeii, in Pompeii city, which was part of the Roman Empire in 79 AD, and is located on the coast of Italy today with a population of 15,000. Life was as lively as ever, and thanks to its rich volcanic soil, the agricultural yield was much higher than other Roman cities. And sea trade had also made the city quite rich. Pompeii, where the summer villas of the Roman nobles were located, was in an ideal location for vacations and small getaways. Gladiators were held in arenas built 100 years before the Colosseum in Rome. Wild parties were held in brothels. Slaves met all kinds of unbelievable needs of their masters. The public had a pleasant time in the baths and shopped in the Forum. Thanks to its wealth and being a gateway to the world, the architecture and art created by the well-educated Pompeians had developed to the point of influencing both European and American architecture years later. There were more than 100 taverns and inns in the city where sailors and travelers could spend their time. And of course, the most profitable profession was bakeries. Look, in this wall painting, you see the baker Terentius Neo and his wife in Pompeii. The parchment that Terentius Neon, one of the wealthy names in the city, holds in his hand shows that his wife was his partner in his business as she was in life. It is obvious that they had a happy home, but how could they have known that a great disaster was waiting for them very soon? The temples in Pompeii were full of devout Romans, but the Romans did not only believe in gods. They were also interested in black magic. In an amulet found in excavations, the spell made by one of the women who could not share the same man is as follows. The slave of Pylamation Postilius, I dedicate his face, hair, mind, breath, and vital organs to the gods of hell. So you won't be able to have her. The man hates him and the girl hates him, and his testicles are useless, so that the girl's insides will always be empty. Although people continue their daily lives, they were aware that something was wrong recently. The earthquakes that have been happening for weeks have started to cause panic among the people. The city's water pipes have been damaged. Some of the baths and pools have become unusable. And more than half of the Pompeii, especially the rich, have already started to leave the city. However, no one thought that the earthquakes were caused by the movements of the Vesuvius volcano, which is 8 kilometers away from the city and has been dormant for years. When they realized this, it would be too late. The Vesuvius volcano is the most active volcano on the European mainland, and more than 3 million people are still living in its vicinity. So it is considered one of the deadliest volcanoes in the world, and it also has another historical feature, where Spartacus escaped and hid with his 77 friends. This volcano is also there, and it has been asleep for a while, a delicate sleep. Now we are going to its awakening together 2,000 years ago. The first major eruption in years at the Vesuvius volcano takes place on October 24th, 79, at 9 a.m. The countdown to the apocalypse has begun. The people of the city jump up and take to the streets with a loud noise. For the people of Pompeii who cannot make sense of what is happening, this is just the beginning. In order to talk about what they will do in the face of what they are experiencing, there's still no reason for the people who have gathered in the amphitheater that you are currently seeing to be afraid of a mountain covered with trees. The situation seems to be temporary. Nevertheless, the frightening sight created by the volcanic eruption causes a significant number of people to flee the city. At 12 o'clock, Vesuvius erupts for the second time, but it is a disaster far beyond the explosion of this morning. This explosion is so big that its power is 1,000 times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The volcano begins to spew 100,000 tons of ash, lava, and sponges. The roofs of many houses are shattered by the impact of the explosion. Flying people were thrown from where they stood. Panic begins in the city, a 35-meter column of lava and ash particles. A terrifying sight has risen to the sky. Can you imagine the sight? A giant 35-meter pile of lava, ash, and rocks rising from a mountain. 14 o'clock, pitch black. By 2 p.m., the sky was already covered in black smoke, and it was impossible to see the sun for those who could lift their heads. The only thing that could be seen was smoke, ash, and rocks. The volcano was not just spewing lava and ash. The pumice stones thrown from the vesicles were raining down on Pompeii. And 30 centimeters piles had formed on the streets, tens of thousands of kilometers of black smoke were creating lightning of incredible intensity. Imagine the sight like this. Pumice stones and ashes were raining down from the black smoke covering the sun, and in seconds giant lightnings painted the sky red. The people of Pompeii must have thought the gods were fighting each other after the second explosion at 12 a.m. The people who realized the seriousness of the situation, exactly it had fallen into chaos. People who wanted to protect themselves from the stones raining down on them were running around the streets with pillows on their heads and trying to take shelter in houses they thought were safe. Those who could enter the houses were locking their doors to escape the looting, and the pumice stones that fell on them were no longer as small as they were in the morning. They were larger and harder. In archaeological excavations, the bodies of 396 people who died from the pumice rain in Pompeii were found. When it was 5 in the evening, the volcanic debris in Pompeii was not still hot or poisonous. Yes, the city was covered with the smoke of the volcano. Ash piles reaching 50 centimeters in height had accumulated on the streets, and the pumice rain falling from the sky had increased. However, a lethally poisonous or hot pile had not yet reached the city. The deaths were still occurring due to the stone rain and the collapse of the weights accumulated on the roofs. So much so that it is thought that 1/3 of the victims of Pompeii died from the collapse of the roofs. Meanwhile, another city had already been destroyed along with its inhabitants. Herculaneum, which was closer to Mount Vesuvius, was covered by a proclastic flow, and all of the city's people had already died. The destruction in Herculaneum was so rapid that even the eggs and fresh bread you see now remained as they were on the first day. This is a baby that was charred in the eruption. This baby could not live the life that awaited him. But even 2,000 years later, it is still talked about. Which one would he prefer? Herculaneum will be completely destroyed under the volcanic waste, forgotten, and will be discovered by chance in 1738 by workers digging the foundations of a summer palace for Charles of Bourbon, the King of Naples. But let's get back to our main topic, Pompeii. The story there is much bigger. Despite everything, the people of Pompeii thought that the situation would improve, and even the rich chained their slaves so that they would not escape and waited for the disaster to pass. However, the thickness of the black clouds was 10,000 meters. Their speed was hundreds of kilometers, and the majority of the 2,000 people who had not left the city at that time were alive. The man you see in this picture is one of the most iconic symbols of Pompeii, and it is thought that he was a muleteer carrying loads for a fee, because when he was found, the mule's body was as preserved as himself. According to archaeologists, he surrendered to his fate while trying to enter a locked toilet from the inside. No one answered even though he knocked on the door many times, and he took his last breath under his blanket. We still know that there were people who thought that everything would return to normal in Pompeii on the night of October 24th to 25th, because people who continued to have fun in bars met their deaths here, and the money boxes in the bars were full. Slaves continued to serve their masters. Pumice and ash piles on the streets reached 80 centimeters, and it was almost impossible to even walk. It is mind-boggling, but there are still people who continue to have fun. Maybe this was their final farewell to an accepted helplessness. We will never know. While they were having fun, the destructive wave was still coming. Ash, smoke and pumice rain had been experienced in Pompeii up until now. The destructive gas clouds that would deal the fatal blow had scattered by hitting the city walls several times at great speed and given the people of Pompeii a little more time to survive. But in the last big wave, a 350-degree fire cloud enveloped the city at a speed of 100 kilometers, and the last surviving Pompeians died without even realizing what had happened. It took only 1 second to lose their lives. They neither felt nor saw anything in their last moments. All those people we see today who were eating, sleeping, hugging each other, most of them were the ones who died with this last cloud of fire, without even understanding what happened. Their last moments remained for us. They died as a story for generations 2,000 years later, on October 25th, at 8 o'clock in the morning. There was no one left alive in Pompeii. The burning cloud that managed to reach the city had destroyed every one of them, and the piles in the streets had reached 3 meters, the ash rain that continued for days. Finally, the city was completely buried underground, and the book of Pompeii was closed. But we know the whole process that happened in Pompeii, the fear on the faces of the people, the pain, the magnitude of the explosion minute by minute, because the witness of this whole disaster was one person who managed to survive. That young Conscius, young Belinus, along with his uncle, the old man, came to Pompeii as soon as he heard about the explosion and began to note the developments. 25 years after the explosion, young Belinus wrote letters describing the incident in detail and ensuring that it reached the present day. Until 2022, it was thought that the explosion had occurred in August. However, with the joint studies conducted in 2022 and the findings revealed, we are sure that it took place in October. The clothes of the exhumed corpses were more suitable for October and November, not August, and the vegetables and fruits sold by greengrocers on the days of the disaster were products of October. When other findings are added, the exact date is thought to be October 24th and 25th, 79. The rediscovery of the city of Pompeii was a coincidence, as in Herculaneum. In 1592, workers hit ancient walls covered with paintings and inscriptions while digging an underground aqueduct in the mills of architect Domenica Fortana. Yes, this was the lost city of Pompeii, but it was not given much attention, and excavations in the area had to wait another 200 years. Now get ready, because the information we are about to learn may change your thoughts about Pompeii from beginning to end. You all know the people who were petrified in Pompeii, but the reason why 99% of these people were petrified is because Joseph, who conducted the Pompeii excavations in the late 1800s, poured plaster through the holes he opened to remove the bodies without changing the position of the bones. In other words, we petrified most of the people you see in order to preserve their positions, not nature. In fact, 1150 bodies have been excavated from Pompeii to date. Only 106 of these have been brought to light in molds. Since there was no need to cast the rest, their skeletons were removed. In total, it is thought that nearly 2,000 people died in the disaster in Pompeii. Most of those who died were old and sick or devoted children who did not want to leave their families. Also, they were slaves who were forced to do so. Very few rich people did not escape from Pompeii and died. The Pompeii disaster was one of the most dramatic scenes in history in all its aspects. This is clear and obvious, but the disaster left us today with the most preserved city in the Roman world and the Archaeological excavation site where we can get closest to the world of ancient times. Today, there is no other ancient city in the world that has been as well preserved as Pompeii. We owe this to the ashes of Vesuvius covering the city. In other words, we owe it to this disaster. Even though 2,000 years have passed, all these people who lived were people like us. People who had feelings, families, who loved each other, people with dreams. Most of them were innocent. Many of them were poor. Many of them were hopeless. This was not a punishment from God. Many people whom God would punish had left the city. The bad ones had won again, and the innocent ones had died. Isn't life empty, my friends?